All right, well, we'll get started here. Appreciate everybody for taking some time here. My name's Scott Brittman, and I'm with my partner Joe Nipieri, and we're the co-founders of Compass Acquisitions. Appreciate everybody making some time here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, just wanted to, again, thank you guys for joining the webinar today. We're going to cover a lot of different topics on succession planning for financial advisors. Scott and myself have been doing this for over 10 years now, and always working with different advisors on the buy side, sell side, putting together mergers and different opportunities. So, with that being said, just kind of want to open this up to the crowd here. I think, these usually go a lot more smoothly when it's more of an open table discussion. So you could feel free to raise your hand on the chat, or we could even put your voice on and you could ask the question that way as well. But any questions you have throughout, we're going to do our best to try to answer them as effectively as we can. So again, we appreciate it, and let's start diving into some of the topics. Want to be mindful of everybody's time here today and kind of keep this under an hour. So, basically, we'll start with evaluating some of your succession options. I think just be putting yourself in the right direction of what you might be looking for. So we'll dive into that a little bit, as well as really finding the right successor, which is probably the most challenging part of this whole process in some regards. So we're going to dive into that a little bit, working on different deal structures, how down payments, how they're some of the financing, things like that. So we'll dive into some of the structuring of the deal. As well as the business valuations, how to maximize the value of your practice, some of the things you could start doing, some of the information you might start putting together. Also, some of the things on your practice now that might affect your valuation, either in a positive or a negative way. So we'll cover a lot about valuations and structuring the deal, and then different timeline options for your succession plan, whether you're 2 years out, 5 years, 10 years, and what that could look like. So yeah, that's really the gist of today. You want
We'll
to?
hop right into it. Evaluating succession options, identify potential internal successors within the firm. This seems to be, really something that a lot of BD reps, kind of look for, and for good reason. I mean, obviously, finding somebody internally is the easiest route for you, as you don't have to repaper clients, and that potentially will keep your retention rate in the high 90s at that point. So if you can find somebody internally, usually your best option. Not to say that externally can't work, but if you're in one of the bigger BDs like an LPL, somebody, Raymond James, something like that, it may be advantageous for you to find somebody if the fit is correct within your firm, or within your BD as well. Exploring external options like a merger and sell, sell and stay, full or partial acquisition is always an option. You may find a better fit outside of your BD, and ultimately, your main concern, I'm sure, is going to be your client's well-being and how they're handled. So sometimes internally doesn't work out, and externally can absolutely work well. I would say that looking for somebody that has done this in the past is always a good route to go, as they would have transition processes in place, and usually a team for acquisitions that can handle a lot of the repapering and stuff like that. So you always want to make sure that you have somebody that has at least done a transition in the past that can show you that success track record as well too. Another option, consider grooming and mentoring a new talent, a junior, maybe somebody fresh out of college. Always always an option that people think about. There are some downsides to that that we see a lot of, and a lot of that is the dropout rate of new advisors in this industry is somewhere in the 90% rate. So you got to be careful with, are you going to put your time and energy into training a new talent and have the possibility of them leaving, and then all of a sudden your timeline that was maybe 3 years has to restart over after a year or two. So you always want to be careful if it's a family member or something like that. That might be a better route for you. to try and train, as you may have a little more insight as to where they stand in the industry and stuff like that. But always something to consider. If it works out, they work out great, but just be weary of the potential downfall of potentially training somebody and maybe having to restart that process. Assess the financial and operational feasibility of each option. That you may get more from a buyer if you are switching and repapering clients, just for the time and energy that would be putting into that. So you do want to look at each option. And we always recommend, meeting with a couple of people and making sure that, the best fit is there for you before actually making that decision.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's a lot to consider. We talk to so many advisors where, the term repapering is almost a dirty word in the industry, but we've seen the repapering process happen very successfully. I know a lot of people it's always better to look for the path of least resistance, and in many cases, if you're with a larger broker dealer, that's an easier route for you to take because there are a lot of advisors. If it's a smaller broker dealer where there might not be a lot of advisors, then it might be a little more challenging. Or if you're in an area where there's not that many advisors as a whole, then that's where maybe looking outside or considering, or you may know everybody within your broker dealer and may not like any of them or not think any of them are a good fit. So just kind of figuring out what's the most important to you, your clients, I think will give you a good picture on which route ultimately you think you want to take with this. Um, so I think that's important. Now finding the right successor. I mean, I think this happens to be, one of the most important topics that we work with. I think, we put together so many buyers, sellers, mergers, and ultimately there has to be a lot of boxes that are checked for this to work out, right? So I think the first thing you want to think of, really, are what are your must-haves in a successor? We'll talk about do they need to, be doing financial planning? Do they need to have, experience with 401ks or insurance? Do they have to be within the same broker dealer? Is geography important? Does it have to be somebody who has a physical presence in the area, or could it be, depending on how you manage your clients, that could change for each individual advisor. So that's important to think about, and that what that does is for even folks like us or any other company you might work with, it helps find the best match for you versus just a shotgun approach where, hey, I'm looking to sell. Here's, let's find some buyers. So I think that's a good thing, a good place to start. Deal breakers, same thing, just at the opposite end. What are things that you absolutely do not want in a buyer? And kind of put those together. And it's kind of, I think once you determine, hey, here's what I absolutely don't want, here's what I must have, maybe you won't check all of the boxes that you're looking for, but, at least if you can get 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 of the boxes, I think you're at least in the right direction. Sometimes, I mean, we work with a lot of RIA groups who they tend to be a little bit more selective on who their buyers are, whether it's not having any BD affiliation or clearing through a certain custodian. So there's a lot there, and you just have to know what that is. And I think that's going to, again, vary from advisor to advisor. Personality is really big as well. It's people always have said to me, you guys are kind of like the match.com of financial advisors. And I think there's a lot to it there because you really, how a lot of these deals are put together, you have the personalities have to match. So if you as a seller, you may be working with the buyer for a period of a year, 2 years, 3 years. So, I think that's really important to match with their personality. Plus, if their personality matches with you, it won't be such a shock to your clients when they eventually start working with the new buyer. So I think that's really important. I apologize. We have okay. It looks like phones are off the hook here today. But anyway, looking at the personality is big. Then, investment portfolio. right? Does that match, your investments? So if you're doing 401ks, or if you're a money manager and you do financial planning and the buyer does all 401ks and insurance, is that going to be a good fit, or is it going to be something that maybe complements each other quite well? So I've seen that too, where the businesses don't have to actually match exactly, but there's that part of it as well. Portability of the clients. Are they able to move over? Do you have them in any proprietary annuity products? I know RiverSource, some of the other ones that but I know there are more firms now that are starting to use it. So, you have to make sure that a potential buyer that you're working with or talking to, that all of your assets will move over to them, because it's challenging if only half of your business, they may not value the other half of your business. So, there's no point of selling to somebody where half of your assets just won't be valued in any regard by the buyer. So portability is important, and then weighing the pros and cons of each buyer. I think that's kind of the last thing. I mean, usually, like Scott had mentioned earlier, we always recommend, talking to 3 to 5 different people, so you can get different ideas, learn the way different firms do different things, and then just really weigh the pros and cons, and ultimately make your decision on who you think is the right successor. So let's say I'll address a question here. At some point, address the benefit of making sure your platform is in place in advance. Hybrid RIA, concerned about portability and attracting successor. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like what I said. I mean, it's portability is very important. I think, if you have a hybrid setup where you're an RIA and have a BD affiliation, that might be easier in a sense. But if you're just an RIA only, and your potential buyer is with a BD, how will those be portable? How will that match up? How easy is that transition going to be? When you're asking an RIA to repaper all of their clients now over to the BD. So hybrid setups are good for acquisitions in general, but so not everybody has a hybrid setup, and whether it's a BD to BD purchase or RIA to RIA, I think the hybrid model does give you a little bit more flexibility. So from that standpoint, yeah, it certainly, as a buyer, could help attract a successor a lot more than maybe just being an RIA only, or just having a broker dealer affiliation. So, yeah,
I mean, I don't think it's very important on the sell side, to be honest with you. And I think
yeah,
we'll be able to find you somebody that matches up well with you. I don't think you have to go into any specific area before getting your book ready to sell.
no,
Um,
that's
you
more of
know,
a buyer thing, I would
yeah,
say.
if you're looking to potentially convert your book over to that AUM model, that's something that you could address in a potential earnout as well too. So there's many different options on that. But on the sell side, I don't think it's very important. You just want to find the correct fit for what your book is now, and then the portability should take care of itself in that capacity. All right, moving along. Structuring the sale. Upfront payment, down payments are typically anywhere from 10 to 50%. I think you're seeing that number get a little more aggressive these days, especially if they're, within the same BD, within the same RA, clearing firm, stuff like that. You may see a larger upfront number be given to you at this point. A lot of buyers right now are using bank financing, which can really be a good option for somebody looking to sell their book, because you will be paid out within 12 months. So typically you'll get an upfront payment. The remainder will be paid out at that 12-month mark, as long as retention numbers are hit. Typical retention numbers are usually 90% retention of clients over a 12-month look back. As long as you hit 90%, typically you'll get the entire amount of the purchase price that you guys agreed upon. You could also do seller financing. That could be used for a portion or the entire sale. Anywhere from 3 to 6 years. Usually 4 to 5 is a lot of what we're seeing right now. With the seller holding a note at anywhere between 5 and 10% interest. Um, those are fine. The one thing you have to worry about, and that kind of leans right into finding a qualified buyer, is obviously your recourse on if something goes awry is to take the book back. And that's not always a great option because you're basically telling your clients these are the people who are going to be taking over for you. And you're going to have to walk back in the door and tell them that they didn't do the right thing and you have to find somebody better. So, obviously, not ideal. So, if you are going that route, make sure that it's somebody that you have done your due diligence on, that trust, and you could request financials, you could do whatever is needed to make sure that they are a qualified buyer, and that's something that we can help with as well. We only really deal with qualified buyers. We only work with 1 or 2 buyers per territory. We make sure that they're vetted out. We make sure that they have clean U4s, and so on and so forth. So that's always an important aspect when you're looking at that seller financing option.
Yeah.
And then the last part is percentage of revenue is really an earnout. If you have a book that is maybe 12B1 fees, or it's A shares or something like that, that may be easy to convert over to that fee-based AUM model. It may make sense for you to do an earnout where you get a percentage down up front and then help convert the book over. You'll really see the upside in helping convert that book over and get a higher payout, as opposed to selling, potentially at a 2 times multiple. You may get that thing up to 3 to 3.25 times multiple. So that's always an attractive option if the book calls for it, and if you're willing to put the work into it as well too.
Yep. I think that's just a quick thing to add on that. I think that's a lot of, like Scott said. I mean, if you're trying to stay on and you feel like you can bring on new assets, a lot of what happens is folks will get to the last 5 years of their career, or 5 to 10, and want to take a little bit more of a back seat and don't want to run the day to day. So they feel like if they do that, merge with the right team, then maybe they can go out and focus more on new business. So that would be a scenario where you'd want to do an earnout if you feel like you can grow it, or even if you don't have a fee-based book as a seller where it might not be as valuable. Now you could take that earnout and convert everything over to fee-based if it's in the best interest of the client, of course. And now that book becomes a lot more valuable. So I think that's great. Jumping kind of right into here into business valuation. This is probably and just so everybody knows too, as part of joining the webinar, we're going to offer everybody a free, just a complimentary valuation of their practice. Happy to kind of go over it. We have a profile we're going to send out to everybody. So I'm always happy to go over each individual scenario and really give you an idea of what the book could be worth, or at least a good range, so you have an idea as you start these conversations.
We do have a question. Is there any way to price a book more like a present value of income stream? 2 to 3 times seems more very limited in terms of value. So really, once you get past usually about $2 million in revenue, you will start looking at cash flow numbers, multiples of cash flow or EBITDA. So that can range anywhere between, I don't know, 4 and 10 times.
Yeah, I mean, some of the private equity firms are paying 15 times EBITDA multiples, right? But I mean, I think that's not always going to be a good fit for everybody. And yeah, I think there you could still look at what the cash flow numbers look like and the EBITDA, even if it's typically, like Scott said, a book that's producing 2 million or more is usually where you start to focus more on EBITDA, because there's a lot more moving parts. You could still focus on what their profit margins are, and kind of look a little bit more into that, because I realistically, when you sell, a buyer, when they take over your practice, they have their own cost structure, and they're going to absorb a lot of those costs into things that they already have, like technology and all of that. So yeah, I mean, and a lot of times it could line up a 3 times multiple of GDC. sometimes lines up to a 6 or 7 times EBITDA multiple. So yeah, I think you could absolutely look at more ways than just saying, hey, here's a multiple assigned to the GDC.
And they typically will line up because you're usually in smaller, not smaller books, but not giant books like we're talking about with 2 million in revenue. The overhead is typically not very high in those. So they usually will line up with one another. But we can also look at all aspects of it. And, obviously we can help you get the best value on your book. Another question, what is the most popular time frame for a sell and stay?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say a sell and stay is probably 5 to 7 years, would be the probably the most popular time frame for that. I mean, it doesn't mean, I mean, I've seen them for 10. But again, it's if you're looking to stay on for 10 years, unless you need some sort of monetization event for your practice, or really just to create a succession, that succession piece. A lot of it is about being able to tell your clients, when they start asking you, hey, what happens when you're retired or you're no longer around, it's important to have an answer to that. And I think that gives them peace of mind that when you're no longer in the picture, you've already positioned them to have something, where you feel comfortable with them and who they're working with. So I would say 5 to 7 years probably the most popular time frame. But I don't think it's really just the idea of a sell and stay is really just like I said, it's to create that succession, monetize your practice, and then maybe take some of the day to day off your plate. How long you want to do that for really doesn't matter. But yeah, that's probably the most popular. Okay, so I guess a few questions. So I appreciate the questions. It always keeps us on our toes here. I like that. So well, diving into the business valuation part. So I think some of the things you want to start off with. I think having all your necessary information prepared. Profit loss on the business. Your revenue breakdowns, commission statements from your broker dealer, or any sort of revenue reports, tax returns. I think that having all of that information where like, hey, I have it readily available, whether it's all saved in one folder. That way, as you start talking to people, you have quick access to it. And then you kind of have an idea yourself. Hey, here's what my revenue are. You'd be surprised how many people I talk to where they don't even know what their revenue numbers are, or they have to go and look through all these different paperwork and try to find it. And so I think what our profile that we'll send out to everybody kind of does is it really makes it simple in a sense, where it's really only a 2-pager. And from most of that information we obtain, we can get a pretty good idea of the value of the practice. So we try not to do a 10-page where you have to spend hours and hours looking at a lot of the information. But these are the good things to have. Evaluating your business and determining a fair price, right? I mean, I think a lot of people already know some of the market multiples and what's going on in the industry, but having that idea, working with either a company like us or any of the other ones out there, to determine, evaluation on your book, gives you a good starting point as you start to have these discussions, and what your worth of the practice is. So I think that's important. Tax implications, I think, is another consideration here. So a lot of, on the independent side, at least anyway, not many W-2 can take that advantage of the capital gains versus ordinary. But a lot of the deals that we see done on the independent space are structured with capital gains. So I think, and whether there's goodwill included or how that's structured will really, I'm not a CPA, so I can't necessarily give tax advice on this. But that's I always recommend you kind of run it by your accountant and make sure. And usually many of the buyers, especially the buyers that I've worked with, they're more than open to structuring the deal, so that you limit your tax liability. And that's usually one of the ways to do it, is having it all as capital gains. So and then again, lastly, just seeking some, where we work with attorneys and CPAs, but we're not them ourselves. So, and we work with deals throughout the whole country. So each one is kind of state specific. So when working on these deals, like we put together purchase agreements, LOIs, a lot of that paperwork, but we always recommend having your own attorney or CPA just kind of give everything a look over, make sure you're putting yourself in the best situation before finalizing a deal. But yeah, I think that's a good starting point as you start to think about, hey, I need to get my business value.
Items that affect valuation, recurring revenue is king. Fee base is king. Fee based advisory fee only renewals versus transactional revenue. Multiples that we're typically seeing right now, anywhere between 2.75 to 3.25 times on AUM, two times multiples I'm sorry, on renewals, or transactional revenue, typically anywhere, it really depends on the product, anywhere from 0 to 1 times is what you're looking at. But recurring revenue, AUM really right now is king. We're seeing the highest multiples that we've seen in our 10 years doing this. So really, really good time to start looking at value in your practice and selling off as we are at all-time highs right now. Client demographics, that's a pretty big one that do affect valuations. The age demographics of your book is a big one. If you have a book that's, mostly, 80-year-old clients, and, you may see a negative tick in that. If you see, books with, clients that are between 60 and 70, you're going to see an uptick in that. Age, location demographics, how many households, that's another big one. If you have 100 million with 100 clients, you're going to get top value for a book like that, especially if the age demographics match up. How transferable is your client base and their assets to a new firm? Yeah, that's certainly going to affect valuation, but at that point, I would kind of urge you to look first within what's going to be the most portable for your book, before actually maybe going into a situation that may affect your valuation. We do have a couple of questions. When you say highest multiples in AUM, what does that mean? Advisory. Um,
Yeah, I think fee based business right now is going for the highest multiples. I'll be honest. I mean, I haven't, I've seen a lot of offers going out more so than when I first started in this business, of 3 times on fee-based assets. Now, that doesn't mean if you have, any fee-based assets that it's ultimately going to go for 3 times, but for practices that are mostly fee-based and are highly coveted, are seeing at least 3 times multiples now. So, but that's only on fee-based. The way you would break that down is fee-based is the highest multiple. That's at I would say a 2.7 times to 3.2 on average, for the fee-based. And then any other sort of recurring revenue like 401k revenue streams, 12b1 fees, annuity trails, things like that are typically valued at a 2 to 2.25 multiple. And then anything transactional is in that 1 times multiple for the most part, which kind of goes right into the another question here about, are period certain 5 years or less annuities worth anything? Yeah, I mean, I think they are. With annuities, it becomes tricky on valuation. I mean, variable annuities, if they're producing a trail, then yeah, they're going to have a 2 to 2.25 times multiple on those trails. If it's an upfront annuity and you're taking the commission on it, that might be assigned a 1 times multiple. But a lot of it, if it's like a fixed index annuity or something, and they were all the contracts were written in the last year or two or three, and they have 10-year surrenders on them, that might not be worth anything to somebody. But to somebody who maybe does a lot of that and sees like, hey, a lot of these are coming up for surrender over the next year or two, I see a lot of opportunity for that. That might be a lot more valuable. So I think a business is always going to be worth what somebody's willing to pay for it, right? And I think just finding the right buyer helps that. You want to make sure that your whole book is worth something to somebody. But from a number game, it's tough to kind of pinpoint some of those annuities from valuations.
You may get some sort of goodwill too on something like that. If you have a mixed book with, some AUM, say, some 401k revenue, and then you have some annuities that may be coming up in 5 years or 4 years, you may get some goodwill thrown into that too. I think that somebody would be more willing to pay for something like that if there was other assets that were coming over that were producing revenue right now. What is the multiple? Again, anywhere between 2.75 and 3.25 times on advisory, two times trails, and anywhere from 0 to 1 times transactional is what we're seeing right now. And then last but not least, what about whole life policies in the 2% renewal category, 1 million a premium? Again, you'll see that in the trail category,
Yeah.
anywhere between 2 and 2.25 times. 2 is a pretty solid number for what we're seeing for that right now.
Yeah, I think anything recurring is going to be two times. I think people are willing to pay that. I think that's a fair multiple. I don't, have I seen less? Sure. But again, I think anything that, somebody buy, think about it from a buyer standpoint. I'm buying these assets and I know every year it's producing X amount of revenue. So, you don't have to go out and work for it. You don't have to, make trades or do whatever you would normally, however you bring in commission. So, that's always going to usually be at least the two times.
Okay, moving on here.
How did you go through? Okay.
Yeah.
No, we covered valuation. All right. Basically, I mean, then you after putting everything together, and we're also gonna send a replay copy out here to those who didn't have a chance to attend, as well as those that just wanted to make sure they picked up some of the information. Let's see, we have just a quick question, anonymous here. Can we restrict our search, or can you restrict your search within a large hybrid RIA firm? Yeah, I mean, basically the way that we would do it is, and that the same person looks like followed up with another question. How does our process service compare or different to other firms like Truelytics? I can't speak for other firms. I know every firm does things just a little bit differently. The way that we like to work, honestly, is we don't charge the seller anything. I think I think that's one of the things that we don't commit the seller. We just say, hey, listen, we're here to make introductions. And really it's important when we work with a potential seller that they talk to us about, like I covered a little earlier, about what their must-haves are, what their absolute, what things don't they want. That helps us search. And if we don't happen to be working with a buyer that fits that criteria in that area at the moment, we could absolutely go out and look for you. I've had sellers come to me and say, we've introduced them to 10 different people before we actually found the right fit, right personality, all of that. So, I think that's our process in a sense. I mean, I would say the difference between, like, some of the other companies is we're not like a listing service. So, what I've heard from a lot of the listing services, if you're looking to sell your book, you put it on a listing service, and now you have, probably getting hundreds and hundreds of inquiries in the first day or two. So, as a seller, how do you go through all those and determine what's the best fit? Whereas a firm like ours, we get to learn a little bit about what you're looking for, a little bit about your business, and then if we're not already working with somebody that fits that criteria, we can absolutely go out and look for that. At certainly no cost or no commitment to you. If you don't like anybody we introduce you to, that's fine. Or if we introduce you to two or three people and you ultimately want to go with somebody that you've known for many years, that's fine too. You're certainly not on the hook for that. So
And the majority of the advisors that we work with are large hybrid RIA firms right now. So a lot of what we have a pretty strict criteria on what we bring into this program and who we work with, and a lot of them, our kind of breaking points are at least 100 million in assets, have done acquisitions in the past, and are typically hybrid firms. So, we would probably be able to match you up with somebody in your area right now with somebody that would fit your criteria. But if not, we have the capability of going out there without mentioning your name or giving away your information and finding you somebody that we think would be a good fit for you.
Yeah, and I think confidentiality is always going to be important here, right? Because I think we're talking to a lot of people who they don't want the word to get out. They don't want people knowing that they're even considering it, and so that's something that we're very considerate with. We take that pretty seriously. We have NDAs and things like that that we'll have put together. So with that being said, we'll kind of just go into this last piece here, and I think we're doing pretty good on time, and we'll kind of open up some questions at the end. But we've had a good flow of questions so far, so I appreciate that. Yeah, basically, establishing a clear timeline for your succession plan. What is your this is a tough one because we hear 5 years a lot, right? And then when 5 years gets there, it's maybe another 5 years I'll stay on. So you don't necessarily have to have a time in mind, but I think having an idea of, hey, do I want to sell and stay on for a year, stay on for 2 years, 5, 10, whatever? Because I think what people don't realize is how long the process actually takes too, right? So if you're looking to sell your business today, you can't just sell it and leave in 3 months. You have to plan to stick around for at least a 12-month period, man, maybe 6 month period to 18 months, let's say, at minimum. So, people don't realize how long the timeline actually is. So if you're 5 years out, it might take a year or more to find the right person. Then it takes another maybe 6 months to a year to put a deal together, structure that. And then, now you're already 2 years into your 5 year, plan. And, you have to stay on for another year to help with the transition. So it ends up happening quick. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, hey, I'm still 5 years out. This isn't really something I need to look at, when in fact, I think 5 years is probably the perfect time to start looking into this, if you haven't already. The next part is, are you looking to like we talked about this earlier, so don't need to go too much into it. But are you looking to continue to grow, structure, and earn out? Right. I mean, if you feel like some people, when they're ready to retire, they don't want to go and continue to grow and find new business. Some advisors that I talk to, that's their favorite part about the business. So maybe they just want to, set something up for succession, have that plan in place. Go out for a few more years, try to see if they can grow the business, and then make their business a little bit more valuable. And what do we have? Is there a question there?
Yeah, can you send us a deck via email? Yeah, we'll be sending out a replay of this webinar to everybody along with a practice profile. You should be getting that in the next couple of days here. Another question: if seller stays on a year or longer, how are they compensated? Typically, built into your sale is really a year's worth of helping transition the book. It really depends on the capacity and what you're working. If you are staying on for a couple of years and working at full capacity, you would typically get some sort of a salary at that point, or revenue split, until you're kind of phasing out of the business, and that will typically go away at that point. And then, what do I lose letting you take my company info and look for a buyer if I'm already working with a company? Nothing.
Nothing.
We don't charge anything on your end for doing that. The buyer in our model is the one who foots the bill for any commissions if we do have a successful transition or transaction,
Yep.
and we do all the legal documentation and everything like that. So if you feel like you want to interview a couple more people, we're more than happy to do that for you. And there's nothing to lose for you in that situation. We don't lock you in, we don't charge or anything like that. The buyer pays commission, can range anywhere between 4 to 6% of the sales price, and again, that's on them. And we've retained buyers under this model to go out and find us opportunities like this, so they're well aware of that commission that they'll have to pay to us if that when that transaction actually does come to fruition.
Yep. And just to go back on that last question too, is yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, if you're working with another firm and they put you in front of one or two people, and we put you in front of one or two people, and you decide ultimately you like theirs better. I mean, it is, we're pretty confident in the quality of buyers that we put in front of people. So, usually we don't really feel the need to make sellers commit where, hey, you either go with our guy or you owe us 10 grand or something like that. It just never has been part of our plan, and that I don't see that happening in the future. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any downside to that. The next part, maybe all you need is a contingency plan. That's important too. A simple buy sell. Everybody, we always talk in this industry about getting hit by the bus, right? What happens when you get hit by the bus? Having a contingency plan set up where in the event, I mean, does anybody know what happens if you pass away or something happens to you and you don't have something like this set up? It's usually not a great. We saw a couple of these last year where unfortunately they passed away, didn't have a succession plan, and now all the clients really just get dispersed throughout the broker dealer, or it ends up being a fire sale because you were the one with the relationships. Maybe your spouse has the ability to sell the business, but how sellable is it if she doesn't have any of the relationships with the client? So I think having something like that set up is at the very least important. And I know the DOL years ago was trying to establish and make it mandatory for everybody to have a succession plan to some degree. So I know there's always talks about that, and you'd be surprised. 90%, 85% of all financial advisors don't even have something set up, which is crazy in itself. But that's the reality. Also, and then lastly, and then I know we have a question here, so I'll cover that right after this. But just ensure a well-structured implementation process. I think having everything set up from finding the right fit, how you're going to communicate to your clients how this is all going down, positioning it as maybe a merger at first where you're going to stay around for a while, you'll still be the point person, but ultimately when you decide you want to be out of the business, you have a good team in place, and just making sure that they'll have the relationships by that point. So just making sure that everything's well structured, and having somebody that has done it before, I think is huge because they've already gone through the ups and downs and have faced some of the roadblocks that you might face on some of these, and they have a way of navigating that and being able to handle it. So I think that's certainly going to tie it all together, but a very important aspect of it as well. And then looks like we have a couple of questions, so we could go over some of these. What do we got? Copies of presentation. Yes, we're going to send a replay copy out to everybody. So we record these, we do them on a monthly basis, and I think having different questions kind of helps steer some of the content in different directions. But yes, we will be. We have a YouTube channel where all of our presentations are on there, but this one will be emailed out to everybody.
And do you assist with these contingency plans? We do. We do, if you just need paperwork done, we do have pricing on that. Is that on the website?
No, we don't have. Yeah, we could send
I
out.
think it's 1,500 that we do for contingency only plan. If you have somebody set up, we could do the paperwork for you. That's not a problem at all. If it's somebody that we introduce you to, we don't even charge for that. So
Yeah.
if you want to talk offline, Lawrence, after this, we're more than happy to assist you with that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think it just matters. And wait, oh, sorry, lost it. Yeah, no, I think he's right. I don't really have anything to add on that. I was going to say something, but it's a rainy day here today.
And then about us, we're a consulting firm that specializes in acquisitions and succession planning services for you guys across the country. We currently work with about 40, close to 50. It's a little under 50 buyers across the country. Again, we've vetted them. We've made sure that they have additional room for clients and or advisors, and that they have done this in some capacity before. Um, I think that's important. I think that you want to make sure that you're working with somebody that has at least done a transition in the past, that can kind of steer you through this process when it comes to moving your clients over. Um, but we do valuations here. We will be sending out a practice profile to all of you. And if you want to fill it out for us, we will give you our thoughts on what your practice is worth. And if you're open to it, we'd love to introduce you to somebody that we work with in your area, if you see it fit. Um, and then I'll put up our information here. This is our contact information. If you have any questions or anything like that, we'll be reaching out to you guys in the next week or so as well too. But these are our numbers, our email addresses. If you have any questions that you couldn't think of right now, we'll be more than happy to assist you with that stuff. So feel free. We have one more question. Who does the evaluation? Be it both me and Joe. We have our own valuation company internally. We don't really sell valuations or anything like that. We use it as a value add to our services here.
Yeah, it's not a certified valuation or
Yeah.
anything like that. We don't charge for it. It's just some of the algorithms that we've put together here over the years that seem to be they're updated constantly depending on what's going on in the industry. But yeah, we do the valuation, and again, it's not a $2,500 50-page valuation, but we could do it relatively quickly, and I don't think there's much deviation amongst the valuations in this industry. I've seen everybody's valuation for the most part, and they're all within range. Some of them are usually higher, some of them are usually a little bit lower. So it just depends. But I think overall, it's pretty. There's not a lot of like I said, deviation amongst them. So
All right. Well, if anybody else has any more questions, I'd be happy to answer them. This is the end of the presentation, and I appreciate everybody taking some time out. Like I said, we'll be sending out an email with a replay of this, as well as a practice profile, and we'll be reaching out to all of you directly as well too to see if we can help in any capacity. So I appreciate everybody's time, and hopefully everybody has a good holiday weekend. And thank you very much.
yep, thank you everybody. Have a great day.